As former President Ben Ali has died in exile in Saudi Arabia. Ben Ali fled Tunisia in January of 2011 as his compatriots rose up against his oppressive rule.
Have you heard about Tunisia's female tyrant? This woman not only put her family members in places of power at the expense of her country's citizens, but she was also in total control of her husband. Some people have given her many nicknames, such as witch. This has led to questions. Is she truly a witch or a terrible person who got hold of power? In this video, we will look at how she became a first lady, what triggered the tyranny part of her, and most importantly, where she is today. Marriage or a partnership of power. Leila Trabelsi's marriage to Zine El Abidine Ben Ali was not just a personal union, it was the foundation of a powerful political alliance. Their relationship began in the late 1980s under controversial circumstances. The reason was that Ben Ali was still married to his first wife, whom the nation knew, loved, and respected. When Ben Ali ascended to the presidency in 1987, following a coup against Habib Bourguiba, Leila became Tunisia's first lady. This new role allowed her to shape the nation's political and economic dynamics. By the time they married officially, Leila had positioned herself as a key figure in the regime, where she exerted her influence far beyond ceremonial duties. Leila played a huge role in consolidating the Trabelsi family's grip on power. With Ben Ali's support, she placed her relatives in influential positions across government institutions, the judiciary, and private enterprises. According to The Economist, the Trabelsi family turned into a quasi-mafia, controlling vast swaths of the economy. This network of influence ensured that the family benefited from lucrative state contracts, land deals, and monopolies. That's not all. Her influence also extended to political appointments. Leila was directly involved in selecting ministers and other high-ranking officials. She wielded so much power, often making decisions that shaped the country's governance. Leila's ambition and assertiveness transformed her from a traditional first lady into a political heavyweight. Her actions polarized public opinion. While her supporters admired her strategic acumen, critics accused her of encouraging corruption and nepotism. A WikiLeaks cable described the regime as one where even your yacht could be commandeered if the first family desired it. Under Leila's guidance, the Trabelsi name became synonymous with wealth, privilege, and impunity. Yet her growing influence also contributed to widespread resentment among ordinary Tunisians. For many, she was the face of the regime's excesses, which caused a disconnection between the ruling elite and the struggling populace. As anyone who witnessed the era would agree, Leila and Ben Ali's marriage was more than a partnership. It was a partnership of power. While Ben Ali held the official title of president, Leila's behind-the-scenes influence made her one of the most powerful figures in Tunisia. Before we go any further, let's look into her early life. Leila's early life and motivations. Leila Trabelsi was born in 1957 in the bustling Medina of Tunisia. She grew up in a modest household as one of 11 siblings. Her father was a fruit and nut seller who worked tirelessly to provide for his large family. Leila's childhood in Medina wasn't luxurious, but she dealt with the active yet challenging world of small traders and working-class families. During this stage of her life, she gained the spirit of boldness to face any situation. As a young woman, she trained as a hairdresser, allowing her to interact with people from diverse walks of life. She met Zine El Abidine Ben Ali around the time she worked as a hairdresser. Their relationship began while Ben Ali was still married to his first wife. As expected, it caused a great deal of scandal. However, this did not stop Leila, whom many have described as a notorious opportunist. Despite the public outrage, Leila's charm and determination secured her position in his life. She gave birth to their first daughter, and when Ben Ali assumed the presidency in 1978, he divorced his first wife to marry Leila. This marriage was the life-changing opportunity she had been waiting for. From humble beginnings, Leila now stood beside Tunisia's most powerful man. According to The Guardian, she transitioned from the daughter of a fruit vendor to a commanding figure in the presidential palace to illustrating the ultimate rags-to-riches tale. Leila strategically elevated her family's status the moment she got into power. She placed her relatives in key government and business positions by transforming the Trabelsi name into a badge of influence and privilege. Critics all over Tunisia and the world accused her of using her position for personal gain. a sentiment echoed in a WikiLeaks report. Leila Ben Ali and her extended family, the Trabelsis, provoke the greatest ire from Tunisians. Leila didn't stop there. She cultivated an image of elegance and sophistication, but behind the scenes, her rise to prominence was driven by a calculated ambition. Catherine Gracie, co-author of La Régente de Carthage, described her as intelligent, ambitious, and utterly without scruples or morals. The Empress of Corruption. Leila Trabelsi's rise to power earned her many titles, but none stuck more than the Empress of Corruption. This nickname reflected the widespread allegations of corruption, nepotism, and extravagant spending that defined her public image as Tunisia's First Lady. Leila and her extended family, the Trabelsis, became known for monopolizing the country's wealth. Through their vast network of influence, they gained control over critical sectors of the economy, from banking to real estate. In all of this, public outcry grew as ordinary Tunisians struggled with unemployment and poverty, while the First Family flaunted their opulence. In 2011, The Guardian reported, "The Trabelsi family's greed has become the country's worst-kept secret." One of the most outrageous accusations was that Leila fled Tunisia with 50 million gold bars during the revolution. While these claims remain unverified, they were widely believed because they aligned with her reputation for excess. Another point of contention was Leila's lavish spending. Reports of palatial mansions, luxury cars, and designer wardrobes triggered outrage. A WikiLeaks cable described her as the most despised woman in Tunisia, citing her family's unending quest for wealth and their exemption from taking whatever they wanted. One particularly popular story involved her son-in-law keeping pet tigers fed with prime cuts of beef. For a moment, let's examine this. Can you imagine this kind of wastefulness when many families were languishing in abject poverty? That era was nothing but a big red flag that shows how detached the First Family was from ordinary Tunisian struggles. Her use of nepotism to install family members in powerful positions further fueled resentment. Her close and distant relatives were placed in high-ranking government roles and given preferential access to lucrative business opportunities. Critics compared the Trabelsi family to a mafia because they controlled resources with an iron grip. This image of corruption and entitlement became a point for public anger, especially during the lead-up to the 2011 Jasmine Revolution. Protesters saw her as a reminder of everything wrong with the regime. As one Tunisian demonstrator told Al Jazeera, "She didn't just steal money, she stole our dignity." The fall of the regime. In 2011, the Tunisian people felt they had had enough, so they revolted. The Jasmine Revolution was a turning point for Tunisia, igniting a wave of uprisings across the Arab world. The protests that unseated Zine El Abidine Ben Ali's regime were triggered by widespread discontent over unemployment, corruption, and government repression. At the center of this discontent was Leila Trabelsi, whose opulence and corruption became the reason for people's frustrations. The spark for the revolution was the self-immolation of Mohamed Bouazizi, a street vendor whose death added more oil to the fire of desperation that was already burning in the hearts of everyday Tunisians. Protests erupted across the nation. Their demand was simple. They wanted political reform and an end to the Trabelsi Ben Ali regime's exploitation. Time magazine wrote, "The Jasmine Revolution was not just about politics. It was more about reclaiming dignity from a government that had robbed its citizens of opportunity and hope." When the protests started and intensified, Ben Ali's government at first responded with a mix of empty promises and brutal crackdowns. However, the growing demonstrations, amplified by social media and international media coverage, proved too much to contain. By January 2011, the regime faced an unstoppable tide of dissent. In the middle of the pressure, Leila and Ben Ali made a desperate bid to save their rule. The couple attempted to calm the protests by announcing reforms, including economic measures, and a pledge for Ben Ali not to seek re-election. But protesters dismissed these promises, wanting only immediate change. As protests reached the presidential palace in Carthage, the family's once tight grip on power crumbled. On the 14th of January 2011, after a final attempt to address the nation, Ben Ali realized his time was up. According to the New York Times, Even his closest advisors began to abandon him as they sensed the end of an era. Up till today, people still talk about how Leila played a big role in orchestrating their escape. Accounts suggest she convinced Ben Ali to leave because she feared for their safety and their children's future. As the streets filled with chants of freedom, the first family boarded a private jet headed for Saudi Arabia. Their hurried departure left a power vacuum in Tunisia, with many of their associates also fleeing or being arrested. Protesters stormed the Trabelsi family's properties and uncovered evidence of their opulent lifestyle, including luxury cars, designer goods, and exotic pets. While in exile in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, Leila and Ben Ali lived in relative obscurity, far from their days of lavish power. Saudi authorities restricted their movement and ensured they could not meddle in Tunisia's affairs. Despite this, Leila remained defiant and even disdained those who turned against them. Leila's flight from Tunisia ended an era, but left a lasting impact of bitterness and anger among Tunisians. During her tenure as First Lady and escape, her actions were long discussed as a woman full of corruption and excess. One protester told The Guardian, "She thought she could take everything, but she couldn't take our revolution." Assets frozen and legal troubles. After their much-publicized escape, the Trabelsi family found themselves embroiled in a wave of international legal actions aimed at recovering the wealth they had allegedly siphoned from Tunisia during their years in power. The first thing that hit them was that governments and financial institutions across the globe began freezing their assets. This was not limited to bank accounts. It included properties and other holdings suspected to have been acquired through corruption. The Tunisian government, supported by organizations like Interpol and the United Nations, spearheaded efforts to locate and reclaim the family's wealth. Reports revealed that the Trabelsi family had accumulated a fortune in luxury real estate, offshore accounts, and high-value assets. In one notable case, Swiss authorities froze millions of dollars in accounts linked to the family. Similarly, properties in France, Dubai, and other countries were seized, with governments cooperating to prevent further asset transfers. 2011 reports by The Guardian wrote about the global scale of the investigation, stating, "Leila Trabelsi and her family have become the focus of an unprecedented international effort to track down ill-gotten gains that symbolized the widespread corruption that plagued Tunisia under Ben Ali's regime." If you think the Tunisian government stopped freezing their accounts, you have no idea what happened. After the asset freezing spree, the Tunisian government formally requested the extradition of Leila and Ben Ali from Saudi Arabia to stand trial for charges including corruption, money laundering, and abuse of power. However, Saudi Arabia refused to comply. Why, you may want to ask? Nobody knows. However, they cited diplomatic and humanitarian reasons. This refusal left Tunisia's legal system to pursue cases against the couple in absentia. In 2012, a Tunisian court sentenced Ben Ali and Leila to decades in prison for embezzlement and other crimes. Leila received a 35-year sentence and was ordered to pay hefty fines. However, the verdicts remained just as the couple remained out of reach. Leila maintained her innocence and dismissed the charges as politically motivated. However, she made little public effort to clear her name, but one can guess why. She can try to clear one's name when it's hearsay, but with mountain-like evidence against her, there is no point in trying. The New York Times described her response as defiant silence, noting that her reluctance to engage publicly only confirmed speculation about her guilt. Meanwhile, international lawsuits to recover assets continued to mount. Several NGOs and activists criticized delays and the complexity of legal processes and pushed for greater transparency in asset recovery efforts. Local governments were sometimes accused of dragging their feet due to lingering ties with the Trabelsi family or fears of political repercussions. Struggles amid isolation. While legal troubles continued, the financial constraints imposed by frozen assets began to take a toll on the family. Accounts that once funded their lavish lifestyle were no longer accessible, and legal fees mounted. Despite their earlier wealth, reports suggested that the family faced difficulties maintaining their standard of living in exile. For many Tunisians, the ongoing efforts to reclaim stolen assets offered a glimmer of justice, even if the perpetrators remained out of reach. Once the center of Tunisia's elite social circles, Leila was now cut off from her network. Saudi authorities restricted her travel abroad and allowed her no visitors without special permission. This isolation was a bitter pill for someone accustomed to wielding immense power. But even with all these restrictions, Leila still tried to maintain appearances. She reportedly hosted small gatherings and sought to recreate a semblance of her former life. However, the lack of public influence and freedom made these efforts futile. Not only did living become difficult in exile, but the exile revealed cracks within the Trabelsi Ben Ali family. Leila's extended family, who had benefited from her rise to power, distanced themselves to avoid public backlash. Meanwhile, reports emerged of internal strife, with some family members accusing her of dragging them into the spotlight and making them targets of public outrage. As for the husband and former Tunisian president, Ben Ali's health deteriorated during exile. Reports suggested that Leila took on the caretaker role while simultaneously trying to manage the family's dwindling resources. Their children, especially their youngest daughter Halima, couldn't help but struggle to adjust to the dramatic lifestyle shift. Despite their fall from grace, Leila and Ben Ali quietly tried to reconnect with former allies and secure their legacy. Many reports indicated that Leila sought to leverage her remaining connections in Europe and the Middle East, where she had hoped to maintain some semblance of influence. However, these attempts were largely unsuccessful, as former allies were reluctant to associate with a family tainted by corruption and scandal. A 2012 article by Al Jazeera noted, "The Trabelsi Ben Ali family's attempts to re-enter the political and social scene have been met with silence or outright rejection, as their name is synonymous with greed and oppression. Gone were the days of private jets, designer wardrobes, and elaborate parties." Leila and her family now had to adapt to a more modest existence. The once dominant First Lady now struggled with the loss of status, and her attempts to preserve a sense of luxury seemed hollow in the face of their diminished circumstances. Attempts at reinvention. In the years following her exile, Leila Trabelsi tried to rebuild her life and wealth through business ventures and her former network. Some rumors said she attempted to launch a luxury goods business, leveraging her status as a fashion icon in Tunisia. She reportedly contacted former allies in the fashion and jewelry industries, trying to capitalize on her connections. However, these attempts were met with limited success. The frozen assets and the bad press surrounding her family made it difficult to attract investors. That's not all. Further reports suggested that Leila explored real estate investments, particularly in Saudi Arabia and other parts of the Gulf region. While some smaller ventures reportedly brought in some income, none could match the vast wealth she and her family had amassed while in power. Despite these challenges, Leila's persistence in exploring new avenues hinted at her refusal to fade into Nowheresville. However, her reputation had already been tarnished, and most of her ventures were seen as desperate attempts to cling to a past that had long since slipped away. As the years passed, Leila Trabelsi tried to save her image through media strategies, including memoirs, interviews, and public statements. To rewrite her narrative, Leila sought the help of PR firms to craft a more sympathetic portrayal of herself. She tried to present herself not as a villain, but as a victim of her circumstances, an ambitious woman manipulated by the system. In 2013, Leila made her first public statement in years through an exclusive interview with a French magazine. The interview largely focused on her life in exile, her feelings about her family's downfall, and her views on the revolution. However, it failed to shift public opinion. Many Tunisians saw this as an attempt to control the narrative and portray herself in a more favorable light. However, Leila's description in the media was overshadowed by her connection to the corrupt regime and the anger that still lingered among the Tunisian people. Unfortunately, her efforts to present herself as misunderstood yielded no positive fruit. Many saw her statements as dishonest attempts to protect her reputation, rather than take responsibility for the corruption and excesses she was associated with. Leila's attempts to rewrite her story also extended to memoirs and books. In 2016, reports came out that she was working on a tell-all book covering her life, marriage to Ben Ali, and exile. However, the project seemed to fall through. Leila and her cronies today. It's been 13 years since the Jasmine Revolution toppled Ben Ali's government in Tunisia, and people worldwide can't help but ask the question plaguing everyone, where is Leila? This includes the whereabouts of his cronies, including his in-laws, loyalists, and allies. Once commanding nearly 20% of Tunisia's private sector, profits through a mafia-like empire, the Trabelsi family and their associates are now scattered across the globe. While some have faced justice, many continue to evade accountability. Let's look into the life of some of them today. We already know that after being deposed in 2011, Ben Ali fled Tunisia and was sentenced in absentia to decades in prison for ordering killings, torture, and corruption. They found refuge in Saudi Arabia, where they lived in relative obscurity until his death in September 2019. Even with the ignominy surrounding his rule, his burial was a quiet affair, attended only by his second wife, Leila Trabelsi, and their children. Leila, often called the Empress of Corruption, became a reviled figure during Ben Ali's rule. When she saw they had lost grip of the country, she quickly planned their escape to Saudi Arabia, where she still resides today. In Tunisia today, many people have written books about how unscrupulous Leila is. She is the woman they teach their daughters not to emulate. Now, what about the rest of her family? One of them is Leila's brother, Belhassan Trabelsi, who is dubbed the most notorious family member by a 2008 leaked U.S. diplomatic cable. Leila's brother, Belhassan, was as corrupt as her sister, if not more. When the matter came to a head, he fled from Tunisia by yacht on the same day Ben Ali fled. He eventually sought refuge in Canada, where he lived lavishly in Montreal until his asylum request was denied in 2016. He then disappeared, only to be arrested 3 years later in southern France in 2019. The next person is Empress Trabelsi. He is one of Leila's nephews. Empress was notorious for monopolizing industries, from real estate to banana imports. He was not as lucky as the rest, as he was captured while attempting to flee Tunisia and was sentenced to 100 years in prison for corruption. In a rare moment of contrition, he publicly apologized on Tunisian television in 2017, where he admitted to bribery and exploitation. Today, he remains in prison despite his offer to return stolen assets. Let's talk about Ben Ali's in-law, Sakr el-Materi. Sakr was Ben Ali's favorite son-in-law and was once seen as his potential successor. After the revolution, he fled to Qatar before being expelled and settling in the Seychelles. In 2017, he proposed paying over $200 million in exchange for permission to return to Tunisia, but the offer was ignored. Then there is Monsef el-Materi, Sakr's father, and a former army officer. Monsef was arrested in France in 2017 on an international warrant. However, Tunisia's request for extradition was denied, so this allowed him to avoid standing trial for money laundering. Another person who did cause Tunisia a great problem alongside Leila was Marouane Mabrouk, the ex-husband of Sirine Ben Ali. Marouane is a shadowy but powerful businessman who controlled major Tunisian conglomerates, which include stakes in Monoprix and Orange. While some of his assets were frozen after the revolution, the European Union controversially lifted sanctions on him in 2020. No one knows why this was allowed, but this enabled him to regain control of key investments. While some of the regime's cronies have faced trials or asset seizures, many continue to enjoy their ill-gotten wealth abroad. Attempts to extradite or prosecute them have often been stymied by legal loopholes, international diplomacy, or a lack of political will. Tunisia's efforts to recover stolen assets, estimated in the billions, have been slow, leaving many Tunisians feeling that true justice remains out of reach. As of 2024, Leila Trabelsi, the widow of former Tunisian President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, continues to reside in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. The many multiple international arrest warrants and in absentia convictions, including a 6-year prison sentence for influence peddling issued by a Tunisian court on November 2022, seem to be water off the duck's back, as she still hasn't given up on returning to her birth country. Right now, public information about what Leila is currently is scarce, as she maintains a low profile in exile. Since her husband's death in September 2019, she has largely remained out of the public eye. In 2012 interviews, she described the Tunisian uprising as an orchestrated coup and expressed a willingness to face trial in Tunisia. What do you think about Leila's style? Do you think she deserved to be tried and punished after all these years in exile? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoy this video, do well to like, share, and subscribe to this channel.